Hello, everyone. Are you tired of being in a room full of people already?
Oh, no.
No?
No.
I would have thought it would be overwhelming seeing so many people together the whole day, information overload. No?
We didn't see longer time, like at least 2 years, we didn't see this much people.
And that's why I'm asking, is it becoming too much already?
No.
We are not used to this anymore, right? Well, but so happy to see you all here. Very excited to be back in Selenium Conference. Back in Chicago after 23 years. Personally, excellent opportunity for me to come back and visit this beautiful city. Thank you all for coming in and making this event wonderful. Let's get started right away. I know it's been a long day probably. I'm still in my jet lag. I traveled from India. It's the end of the day. The lunch was excellent. I overdid myself. I'm feeling the effect right now. So it's up to you to make sure I remain awake. Okay? It's your responsibility. I'm Anand Bagmar, and about 13 years ago, I started my journey in sharing my experiences with a vested interest of learning from others in form of writing blogs, speaking in conferences, and this is a great way to learn from each other. Since last night, I have had to redo my presentation at least thrice because I learned so many interesting new things from each other which would never have been possible in these past 2.5 years. Who do I share and learn with and discuss in the hallway about their experiences, right? I learned so many new things, I had to keep on updating my presentation. Hopefully, you will find some value out of it. Please connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and we can continue the conversation afterwards as well. Okay? Quality. What does that mean? I started my journey in this field as a professional about 23 years ago. I started with testing. Within a couple of years, I graduated to start thinking about quality because I very quickly realized testing does not make sense at all because it is done in isolation by a particular team. But quality is something that everyone can contribute to, and we need to start thinking that way. So quality, what does that mean? We heard an excellent keynote early in the morning from Erica. What are the missed opportunities and how we should get more involved in quality and how to make that better. She mentioned something very interesting. Sorry, my screenshot, I was sitting way back. I'm a backbencher for those who know what that is, right? I was sitting way back, I took a picture. So that's why it's not very clear. But it is important to think about quality-driven. Build a quality product inside out, then test for quality. That is one of the key messages I inferred from what she was saying, and we need to get more involved in that. But what is quality? And this is where you need to start speaking up, and I'll repeat for others, those who are not able to hear. What does quality mean to you? Anyone? Great user experience, okay?
Few bugs.
Sorry? Few bugs. Customer focus, okay? Sorry? Valuable, okay? Yes, to whom? Company and the user. It's overloaded, right? Company is overloaded, user is also overloaded. Sorry, someone said? Robustness, okay? All of these. And unfortunately, it's right, all of these, but at the same time, it is all very vague. We don't know what it really means. You're talking about themes, about concepts, but how do you understand what is the quality of your product? And that is what we are going to try and address today. Okay? So how do you know what is the quality of your product? As a tester, when I once gave this answer, it's my gut feel. I know the quality is good. I almost got fired that same day. But I was right. I knew that I have done my due diligence. I have done my testing. I know this is good to go live. Why is that wrong? How many testers over here? Do you have a gut feel if everything is right or wrong, or you've got a sixth sense something is not really working well? Then why can't this be a metric? It's subjective, okay? But you've done your work. You know what your product is, what it is capable of. Unfortunately, not everyone buys this, right? It cannot be used as a metric. Trust. How many of you says, trust me, I have tested this? I know I have said that, and I have been bitten in the back many more times. But is that something we say? Is that something we use?
I don't think so.
Sorry?
I don't think so.
No? Well, I think gut feel and trust is a very important aspect of doing testing.
So you can use yourself. Like it's not possible to give it to the company.
Not possible to share that same with someone else because it's subjective, it is contextual, the parameters are different. Okay? What are other ways that you can think of concrete data instead of trust and gut feel to really understand what is the quality of your product? Dimitri gave an excellent talk earlier today about the quality gates. He mentioned a lot of different parameters that could be used as gates at various points in your path to production to automatically stop the build proceeding. Unfortunately, he didn't have much time to share, and neither do I, what this could really translate to. That's a completely separate talk altogether, or a conversation. But I think that was a great starting point to think about what are the parameters you need to think from a quality perspective. Unfortunately, a lot of things that he spoke about also are very narrow focused. They're focused from a very specific aspect of automation, not testing as well. Very focused to automation only. But initially itself, I said, it's not about testing anymore, it's about quality. There are many other aspects that you need to think about to understand what quality of your product is. Okay? So, to understand quality, first you need to understand who you are. That is a very important aspect. So let's understand what are the different roles that we represent in this room over here. Any testers? Sorry, that's a wrong question. Any automation engineers? SDETs, automation engineers? Okay, that's also a wrong question. Any SDETs, automation engineers focused on functional testing? Top of the pyramid. Selenium, we are in Selenium conference, right? Okay, good number of hands. Anyone focused on API testing? Great. Manual testers? Sorry, I don't like to use manual testers too much. It's thought of in a different negative way. But people who are not writing code or implementing scripts, right? Exploratory testing, manual testing. Any manual testers?
If you are not a good manual tester, you cannot be an automation tester.
Different discussion. I agree, but different discussion. Okay? Manual testers? Few hands at least? Yeah? Great. Developers? Any developers? Okay, few hands, great. Product owners? Leads, managers? Great. So we represent a good set of roles, and I'm sure I'm missing out on a few roles as well. Customers, we all are customers as well. We sort of are proxies to the customer, right? But it's important to understand who we are. What is the role we represent? What is the persona that we represent? This is what I sort of came up with as a heat map of sorts, what the different roles are. And of course, there are many more. This is what I assumed our roles would be in the audience today. Okay? But once we know who we are, what personas we represent, then it starts getting a little easier to narrow down and focus on what quality means to each of these roles, because that is also subjective. Okay? Now the key question is, for whichever role that we are representing, how do you know that you have added value to your product quality? How do you know, other than trust and gut feel? That is what we are going to try and address right now. Okay? How do you know if you are adding value? And to know if you're adding value, you need to understand how you're going to measure to say, other than gut feel and trust, this is how I know I am adding value to the quality. Okay? So what metrics do you use? What metrics do you use to understand the value of your work, to understand the quality of your product? We spoke about some of these, right? Less defects, user experience, customer experience. But some of these are not very tangible data oriented, right? Less defects is, we know that it's a number. User experience, customer experience is not a number. There's no concrete data. So what are the metrics? Can you all share some metrics that you use or you have come across?
Production defects.
Defects, yes. Production defects.
Defects found by testing the sprints, some test effectiveness metrics.
Yeah, so what metrics?
That it is by measuring how many bugs were found, by tests.
Okay, so deeper analysis into the defects, how they have been found by tests, manual, production issues, whatever, right? So classifications of the defects. Yeah.
Test result trends.
Test result trends. What do you cover in the test result trends?
We found the repetitive failures.
Repetitive failures. So again, you're going back to defects. Defect leakage. Again, it's defects. What other metrics?
Increased user integration or increased user
Engagement?
engagement. Thank you.
Increase user engagement, okay. But that is not part of testing, right? That is after you release your product, then you're going to see how the engagement is. It's an important metric, but it's not as part of, am I ready to go live? Test coverage of requirements, okay.
We have code coverage also.
Sorry? Code coverage, excellent, yes. Mean time to resolution, great. Response time of the website, yes. Again, it comes down to defects, yes. Okay? So we have a standard set of metrics that we refer to, right? We've gone from waterfall to agile and I don't know what else. The metrics are sort of still similar, what we're looking at. We've added more aspects of customer focus, user focus data, but we are still looking at the same set of metrics, pretty much. Okay? For all of these metrics, does it matter who you are? What is your role? You're all one team, but how do you know what is the quality of your product? That is the question we are trying to answer. As a tester, how do you know what is the quality of your product?
Covered full requirement coverage.
Requirement coverage, you're still looking at top of the pyramid in that sense.
Also execution completion.
Execution completion, okay?
Defect or less defect or number of defects.
Similar metrics again come back, right? Similar metrics come back, okay? So, in my opinion, I think it's very important to really understand your persona well. Yes, we are one team, but we are focused on specific aspects of the SDLC. And with that specific focus, you have access to different set of data, different type of information about your product. Is that a fair statement to say? As a developer, I know about the inner workings of the code or the module that I'm working on. As a tester, I'm looking at a deployed product and have access to the full product. So the scope is different. The type of data you can infer out of it is different. Maybe it is time to rethink, is the same set of metrics the right measure to look at to understand the quality of a product? Okay? So to me, it is important to understand who am I in this whole ecosystem. And based on who am I need to look at what metrics are going to be relevant to me to understand the quality of my product. And based on that data, how can that help me take decisions to make my product quality better? It's a slight or maybe a fundamental shift in the way we need to think about this aspect. Slight or fundamental shift, depends, it's subjective again to how we are approaching our role. Okay? But we need to change our focus to thinking about what data will help me take better decisions so that I can become more productive in helping make my quality better, product quality better. Okay? So from this perspective, now that we've set the baseline of how we need to approach it, I want to share from different perspectives what data might be interesting to look at to understand quality. Okay? Disclaimer, probably late in the session, there are a ton of metrics. I am not going to give you any answers. So if you have come looking for answers, I beg for forgiveness right now. I'm not going to give you any answers. I'm going to share information. You have to put it in your own context and see what is going to make sense to you. Okay? So let's look at metrics that indicate some quality. I will start off from the management or the lead's perspective. That persona looks across the whole product in terms of its delivery, what the requirement should be, what the feature should be, how the delivery should happen, and is the product actually performing as well for your users or not. That sets the tone for what the feature set needs to be, how the work needs to happen. So it's important to start from there. What do they see as quality? That is setting the vision for each different role, how they need to approach their work. So from a management and leads perspective, I think there are two main aspects that they care about. First is the speed of release. I want to make quick releases to market. Obvious, right? Management wants the product to go out as quickly as possible. Now, to get the speed of release, to understand the speed of release, what are the different metrics that can help understand this? Code maintainability. Does management even care if the code is maintainable or not?
They don't care, but that's how you get faster releases.
That's the working model. I understand what you're saying. But from a management perspective, if I'm CEO or a CPO, whoever, right, do I care what is my team capacity or not? I want to get quick releases to market because that is their focus, right? They understand the ecosystem, they understand the customers. They know if I get a release done before a Black Friday sale, I'm going to get a huge turnaround. That is their perspective. So they care about speed of release. They don't care about tech debt, maintainability, team capacity. They want speed of release. Stories are done. That comes down to, okay, does it matter if I have one story or 1,000 stories? When we talk about speed of release, it's actually how many releases can I make per week, per month, or whatever it is, right? Maybe that's a metric that they care about. How quickly can I get my features out? Yeah? Time of regression. That is a measure of how quickly you can get out. But that probably gets a little bit more micro-focus from a management perspective, because again, there could be development time, release time, deployment time. Do they even care about that? Again, the metric is very important, but probably not as important for management. That might be too much information for them, right? So from a release perspective, the cycle time is important. If there is a feature that has been prioritized, how long does it take to get it out to production? It doesn't matter how many user stories are there. It doesn't matter what the team capacity is. In general, for a feature, how much time does it take to get it released to production? That's a cycle time. And of course, each feature is going to have a different cycle time because of complexity, the nature of changes. But in general, when you start averaging it out, you sort of get a sense of what my cycle time is. It's like your velocity of sorts, right? It sort of averages out over a period of time. So cycle time is an important metric from a management perspective to understand, am I doing well or not? Is my processes, practices, teams in tune with delivering features to market as quickly as possible? Second is the change lead time. After development is complete, how much time does it take to get the product out to production? This is where the regression time starts becoming a factor, right? Many a times, organizations have got a lot of inefficiencies in the process. There might be 5 different environments, 10 different teams, different compliance, and one team is already working on a regression. They cannot pick up the testing for another feature, so this is going to get delayed. This shows up inefficiencies in your processes. So what is the change lead time after development is complete to get that feature out to production? And this we are looking at a macro level for the product. This is what the management view is. If a change lead time increases, they know there is some inefficiencies in my process. They know where to dig into. That is where specifics of the different phases of testing, deployments, and all aspects will come into picture. Okay? The next thing is work in progress. Do I have 10 features which are waiting to go being developed and tested in the overall process? And none of them is really going through to production. So is my work in progress, my WIP limit too high? If I reduce that, maybe I can focus on getting things done. This can become an interesting metric as well in combination with the cycle time, change lead times. Bug leakage, we spoke about defects, right? But bug leakage, overall in your environment cycle, are you getting fewer and fewer defects as you go towards production? If not, that means there's some inefficiencies in your process again, the way your environment's infrastructure is set up. There might be some other underlying issues as well. This can give very tangible ways to look at where the problem might be. Tech debt is another aspect, and this is where what you mentioned earlier about how efficient is the team, how much work is going on in parallel. If the code is not maintainable, you are not going to be able to make quick changes and releases. So the practices aspect become relevant here. Initially, it's fine. You can take any shortcuts and proceed, but eventually it's going to start biting you. You will not be able to do your changes as effectively, as quickly. So what is your tech debt? And it's important to track the tech debt from development and testing perspective, which also includes automation. And testing is an important aspect because a quick example, if you keep adding the number of test cases to be executed in every regression cycle without thinking about can I delete off some of them, which is not relevant anymore, that number is going to keep on increasing. Your regression time is automatically going to keep increasing. And that is tech debt. Teams usually do not get time to do the maintenance. Are we tracking that aspect? So from a management perspective, I think these aspects become very important when you start thinking about speed of release. And I'm sure you will be able to think of some more interesting metrics that can give them that insight. The next thing is that management cares about. Speed without quality does not make sense. So how do I know about quality? And remember, it's quality, what Dimitri again showed, right? The email report that is sent out, that's just a testing team report, or the automated test report. That is not going to work out. That is just one part of the story. But from a quality of the product perspective, what are the different things that management can get insights from? Test execution status. This includes manual and automation. Automation includes all layers of the pyramid and NFRs. Everything combined is what is the test execution status. That is important. So you think about execution time, root cause of failures. This is extremely important. Just saying 3% of my tests failed is not sufficient. If you don't go deeper to understand what are the reasons of the failures, you cannot do much about that. It just remains a number on some report. So root cause analysis of the failures is very important. That way, you are not just applying a Band-Aid on top of a wound, you're actually getting to understand why is that wound there in the first place, and you can make changes to reduce that happening again. You think about the failures per environment where the test might be running as well. That can again give you deeper insights where the problems might be and how to fix that. You have to think about mean time to recovery. This is again something which is not thought of too much, but if something bad happens in production, how much time is it going to take us to recover from that? That again comes on under quality of product. How many of us think about it from a testing perspective about mean time to recovery? We don't really, because again, our focus is different. But from management perspective, leads perspective, when they look at a product offering, they have to think about this aspect as well. Okay? So time to restore if there's a disruption. And the defect RCA, we spoke a lot about different types of defects. I'm sure we can think about few more areas as well. But that is an important aspect to understand where are the defects coming from, what was the reason of it. And if you understand the reasoning, then you can make some changes to reduce that happening again, prevent that happening again. Okay? So in defects, think about priority severity by environment, which environment you found those, found by automation or by manual testing or reported by from production. There could be many different ways how to classify this. Okay? So this is what, from a management or leads perspective, can become very helpful to understand what is the quality. Let's get focused now from a testing perspective, because that's who we are. From a testing perspective, let's start with the automated test. We are in Selenium conference, of course, it's automation focused. Let's start with the automated test. So what type of data is going to be helpful to understand the quality from your automated test? Now, each of the tests in the pyramid indicates certain aspect of quality. Do you have a dashboard where you are able to get the status of your automation all in one place? Does that automation cover your functional, visual? Does it cover NFRs? Does it cover code coverage and quality? All these need to be consolidated into one place. It doesn't have to be the same tool, don't get me wrong. Tools can be different, technologies can be different. But is there a way to get all this information together in one place so that you can get a visibility into what's the status of your automation? Because all of these tests combined, including the manual exploratory testing combined, tells you what is the quality of your product. You need to know that. Next is the test execution time. And you have to start classifying this again based on pursuit, sanity, regression, and whatever other you might have. Per environment, because you want to run your tests in different environments as well. It's not going to be the same test. The tests have different focus in different environments. Do you have the data that tells you how much time it's going to take? Because you might see for less number of tests, it's taking a longer time in a higher environment because there are more weights, more dependencies, performance issues, and that can give you insights into maybe there's some other problem over here. And the problem could very well be how your test is implemented for that matter. It's not just an environment or an infrastructure issue. But as a tester or whoever is working on that automation, that information can become very helpful to say where are the inefficiencies in my execution? What can I do to make it better? Root cause of test failures. Dimitri showed some great examples: automation defect, environment issue, product issue. I actually classify the tests in many more granular levels of failures as well. Is it a test data issue? Is it a device-specific or a browser-specific issue? Again, based on context of your application, think about what is going to give you more granular information that will help you take decisions in a better way. That can be very important. So again, over here, you could think about it in this way. So it could be environment issue, and identifying flaky tests is a very important aspect as well. Is that something that you can classify in your automated test execution results? That these tests are flaky for whatever reason, and we need to investigate that separately. Trend analysis. What is the status of the test execution over a period of time? Many a times I've come across teams who say we are working agile, all we care about is the last test execution cycle. My build is green, everything is good. But if you don't look at patterns of your test execution, you might miss out on the flaky tests, intermittent issues that are there. If you don't do your functional benchmarking of your test execution, you would not realize if the same test is taking more time to execute over a period of time. And that can indicate certain aspects, whether, again, could be a test issue, Could be an environment issue, could be a product issue, you don't know. So trend analysis is important. Functional benchmarking is very important again. The build pass percentage. How many of us look at that? How many times is my product build passing, which includes compile and the test execution as part of the build? That indicates aspects of quality. My product is not stable. The builds keep failing. If there are compile issues that keep coming up every time, what is it that can be done to prevent that? It's a very actionable thing. Maybe better pull request reviews, PR reviews, right? That could be one way. Maybe pair programming could be another way. And it could be isolated to a particular component of your application where the team might not, it might be a new team. They don't understand the nuances very well. But it can give you very actionable data where the problem is and how to take it forward. The number of new tests automated. In some ways, this is a vanity metric. I have automated more tests, but it actually shows there's some progress happening as well. The reason this might be important metric is if you have got a lot of test failures and the team is focused on just maintaining and fixing tests instead of automating new tests. So that is where this can potentially become an interesting metric to use as well. Okay. So these are some information, some metrics from an automated test perspective. For non-automated testing, there can be interesting data for this as well that you can capture. The most important thing is your regression time, your manual testing time getting reduced over a period of time or not? We end up automating so much, but if it is not reducing your manual test, the same test that you've identified, it takes longer and longer to execute. That does not help the team in any way. The reason we are doing automation is so that it reduces manual testing time and you get more time to do exploratory testing. Are you even getting time to do exploratory testing? Are you capturing that as a metric? How many defects are getting escaped from automation which are caught by manual testing? Is that feedback going back to the team who's doing the automation? Maybe your test was not implemented correctly, maybe you missed out on certain scenarios out of that, or this was a test that was missed out from automation altogether. How much percentage is completed versus remaining? Now this is a very funny metric in my opinion. If I have 100 tests that need to be executed manually, 50 tests completed in 2 days does not mean the remaining 50 will get completed in the next 2 days, right? So this metric can be a very tricky number in that sense, but at least it gives us general sense how much is done, how much might be remaining. So there are some metrics where you need to put a lot of focus, some metrics you want to just look at it at face value and say, okay, this is indicative, let's proceed from here. This is a very important metric. How many tests were re-executed? And then getting deeper into why. Was it because of defects were fixed? I needed to re-execute. Defects were fixed but not fixed correctly, so I need to re-execute them multiple times. Was it an environment issue? Was it test data issue which needed this to be re-executed again? This is a very important metric to find out inefficiencies in your system. And the number of new tests added again. While added is there, I'm implicitly assuming in a way that maintenance is also happening on that, right? You're also deleting stuff. And defects. As testers, we have spoken a lot about defects already. But for defects, you need to think about the defect leakage in your path to production. How many of us understand what is path to production? Few hands. Can someone explain what is path to production? Sorry?
Development and then testing and then production deployment.
Okay. Okay, so basically the number of environments you have before you get to production, right? Right, that is your path to production. Now, does everyone understand? Everyone clear about what is path to production, right? With that understanding? Now, does everyone understand in your own context of whichever application team you're working with, what are the different activities happening from a testing perspective, a quality perspective, in each stage of that path to production? How many of us understand that or know that in your own teams, what is happening? So you know exactly what is happening in your development environment, what is happening in your build pipelines, what is happening in your test environment, how that in deployment is happening, and so on, right? That is a very, very important aspect to get an understanding. What is that path to production? What are the activities that are happening in each stage? Because that will tell you how you can shift left and get better, or where the inefficiencies again might be. And based on that, what is the defect leakage? There is a very strong correlation in that. So again, you think about different aspects, how to classify these defects, and how long are your defects open, the age. That is very important. If the defects are open for a long time, it might as well delete those off because, or close them off, because you're never going to fix them overall. Okay? So this is from a testing perspective. Now the product team. And we can think about these metrics for each different persona. I'm going to share some, I'm going to go through very quickly for the others. But it's important from the product team perspective to understand what is the feedback that you are getting for the feature from the field once the release has happened. Because product team is coming up with feature requirements based on certain understanding or expectations how it will do in the market, how it will help the consumers, how it will help your organization. After the release, you have to correlate it back with what the expectation was and what is happening to do any course correction if required. Another important aspect is when the requirement is in implementation and testing phase, how many observations or questions were asked about the requirement, missing requirements, confusing requirements. That is again a feedback to the product team how they can get better and reduce the inefficiencies. So these can be very important aspects to think about as well. And then you go on to other roles, right? You will have the developers. Of course, we didn't speak much about developers. Few quick things I'll talk about what metrics might be important from a dev perspective. Code quality, we all know. But things like how many active versus inactive branches do you have? Are you doing trunk-based development or not? If not, that is going to create different problems for you. How many successful builds versus failing builds do you have? That again shows your processes, practices are not set up correctly. Do you have your pipeline set up as code, or are you configuring the pipelines manually? This is going to create inefficiencies as your product needs to scale, as you need to add new features quickly. The number of tests in each pipeline, the number, you have the release stages that you're setting up in your pipeline, and so on and so forth. How much time do developers need to wait to get feedback of all your tests before they say, yes, I'm actually done with my development work. There are no tests that have failed as a result of my changes. So there could be a lot of such interesting metrics that you can look at. Now the problem is there are so many interesting metrics. If you focus on this, you'll never get any work done as well, right? So you have to be conscious of the fact what is going to help you in your role based on the big picture goal of what the speed of release and quality of your release needs to be. You have to correlate that. That is going to be very important. And likewise, think about metrics for ops, SRE, data engineers, and so on, whichever roles might be there in your team, because each of them need to contribute towards quality and they need to be able to measure it. That is the key. They need to be able to measure it with concrete data, not as a gut feel, not as trust. There has to be something more than that. Okay? So with that, let's start summarizing. What are some practices that will help? I'm going to focus on the practices from an automation point of view, not for other areas. So for automation, if you don't have a clear definition of what your clear understanding of what is your ideal test pyramid, an ideal test pyramid is not really a pyramid in that sense. It is contextual. If you are using a lot of legacy components, legacy systems in your application, you cannot build a proper pyramid based on that. So understand your application. Based on that, you define what is your test pyramid that makes sense as a end goal. And based on that, you need to create practices how to get there. Set up your plans how to get there. The next thing is the test execution strategy. You need to be very clear about this aspect as well. What is going to help you get more efficient in your testing, in your automation execution, that is going to give you quick feedback. So path to production, here's an example of what path to production looks like. It's deliberately a small picture because it is very contextual to each team. But you need to think about, as soon as I can find my cursor, I'm not able to, that's fine. So you've got your code repos. What needs to happen when you raise a pull request? What type of test should run there? When you run your build, what should happen? When you merge your feature branch into trunk, what should happen? What tests should run at each different stage? You're not repeating the same test. The scope of test changes, the intent of each test changes based on the environment and stage of your path to production. So you have a simple visual created based on your organization, and that will help you a lot to say this is where we need to focus more because I cannot have defects going to the higher environment. What can I do to prevent it over here? So this is a very important aspect that every team needs to have. And then you have to design your automation based on scale and quick feedback. Aspects which are always missed out is your test data strategy, which is going to mess you up every time. What is the data strategy for each environment, each stage of your path to production? You need to have that. How are you going to run your tests? How much parallel execution can you do or not? You design for that and implement based on that right from the first stage. Only then you will be able to scale. You cannot re-engineer your framework after you've got hundreds of tests written. It is too late. There's a lot of tech debt that you have incurred already. Okay? And when you have all of this, the key thing is going to be how can you get a unified and real-time dashboard to understand all this data automatically. Now, real-time dashboard is the key. You don't want to be spending time collecting data. You don't want to make that as part of your weekly activity and plan for that. I'm going to need 5 hours every sprint or every iteration just to create my report. It's a silly, stupid waste of time. Sorry for the words. Think about the personas. For whom is that information important? Definitely use the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle. How can you get 80% value in 20% time or maximum value in minimum time? And focus purely on that. Don't try to cover the remaining 20%. It's a simple thing like code coverage, right? I can get to from 50 to 60% easily in a week's time, but 60 to 62% can take a year for me to get because that requires a lot of re-engineering. Doesn't make sense. 80-20 rule will give you maximum value. Based on that, automated data collection, see patterns in that data, use visualization, see patterns. If you see anything that is out of sync or it seems like an anomaly, there you investigate, and that's where collaboration will happen. That's where one team effort will come into picture. You talk to people, you figure out why is this seeming like a dip in our velocity or defect leakage has increased. Talk to that team, figure out what is going on. And you will get much more value than trying to get all the data over here. Data can be huge, it can be messy, but if it is not used, it is of no value to anyone. Don't use it in that way. 80-20 rule, very, very important. So what's next? Last minute, okay? Know your personas, very important, but eventually it has to bubble up to the top, right? The vision of the product, vision of the organization, and what value proposition you have for your users. How are you going to measure that? And that is how it's going to trickle down into each role, how you can contribute to make that product quality better. Identify the core metrics that you can help to understand this. We already discussed a lot. I had probably 3 times more metrics which I didn't show on the slides. If you put your heads together, you'll have 20, 30 times the number of metrics in 10 minutes. But it doesn't help anyone. Identify important metrics that is going to help you. And these metrics should help you take decisions to make your quality better. That is the key. It is not for someone else to satisfy someone. Yes, I've shared the report with you. You delete that email, doesn't matter. It has to be valuable. You should be able to take decisions with whatever data that you see. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. Metrics should be helpful. Use the information to take decisions further and make the product better, improve the processes and practices as well. Thank you so much for your time. I hope this has been a little insightful.
Thank you very much, Anand. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions. I don't want to. We're the only thing standing in between you and the reception upstairs. So please join us in Wolf Point Ballroom.
This is more interesting, Marcus.
I agree. I mean, if y'all want to stick around, absolutely do.
Who
I'm
cares
going
about
upstairs.
drinks or whatever?
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.